Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tell That Show. As always, I am your host, Julia J.K. Allen. I am an editor and author who loves to write fantasy and horror and sprinkle a little bit of magic in everything. As you can tell, I'm not used to introducing myself. I usually get to introduce our wonderful co host, Kirsha Fox, who unfortunately is a little under the weather today. But I'm very excited to bring on our guest, Doug Lawrence, who is an international certified mentor. He has been working with researchers to examine the role of mentoring as a support for those struggling with post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. We're very excited to welcome on our show today Doug Lawrence. Hello and welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Yes, it's our pleasure, of course. Like I said, unfortunately, Kirsha can't join us today, but you and I are going to have a blast just talking about writing and the writing journey. So, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started with writing? Like, what made you want to become an author and what your journey has looked like so far?
Oh my goodness. So it goes back to 2013 or thereabouts. And I guess I kind of owe the journey to one of my best friends that I went through the police training academy with. But he uh, he had been writing daily messages to his children, inspirational messages to his children. And somebody had said to him, you should compile all these in a book, and because it would be great. And so he went ahead and he did that, and then he and I were having a conversation, and his his guidance that he gave to me at that particular stage was much the same as what he had got, in that I'd been writing blog articles and had a large number of blog articles on my blog site. And he said, what you need to do is take all of those, pull them all together, massage them a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, and then turn them into a book. And so the gift of mentoring was exactly that journey that I went on. And then from there, I went to my second book, which
Mm-hmm.
is You Are Not Alone. And I did much the same sort of thing. It was suggested to me that mental health was something that I'd have a different perspective on, and that I should think very strongly about writing another book along the different lines, but along the same sort of pathway, which is, you've got all this information that needs to be shared, and here's an opportunity for you to do so.
Yes, and I feel like mental health, especially, is so important to talk about because, like, when we're reading your bio, you talk about just this. There's so much stigma in even having to ask for help or to admit that you have something going on under the surface.
There's all of that, and then you add into the whole mental health piece, because I've got a third book now that I'm starting. So You Are Not Alone is published, it's out there, it's
Hmm.
available, but I'm working on a third book, and it's going to address or to speak to the topic of grief,
Oh yeah.
cancer. So the fact that cancer is one of the leading causes of death globally,
Hmm.
and basically what I'm suggesting to people is that you can navigate or go through a healing journey, but you need to have mentoring as part of that. Mentoring can be sort of the bridge between those professional appointments and stuff like that. So um,
Right.
yeah, so adding to that, the grief part, I have firsthand experience with that, in that I lost my wife to cancer.
I'm
Actually,
very
both
sorry for
things.
your loss.
Yes, thank you. In 2021, and I've kind of focused this next book, book number three, so that it addresses some of the impacts that you can actually have or get
Right.
as a result of the loss. So going through the grieving process.
Yes, I feel like it's something that we've all heard about, but you don't really know what it's like until you go through it. But like all the stages with grief and all of that, the denial, anger, bargaining, and all of that can be something that we all feel like we understand, but yeah, to truly feel the impact, you feel it when you go through a loss. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always love when they say that like grief is oftentimes love that just has no place to go, right? It doesn't have a home anymore. And that can be a very poignant way of discussing grief. So your books tend to be kind of along the nonfiction, more self help. What made you choose that genre? Is it just because you understand the topic so well, or?
I think so. I was heading down the road as it was, and because I know when we not so much with the gift of mentoring, but more so with You Are Not Alone, because I was truly blessed. I had a number of people that kind of circled around me and said, "We're going to help you get this book through, get
Oh,
it
very nice.
published, and get it out there." I like to call them my team, but that's probably a bit of a stretch. But, and so with that sort of was how it all came to light, was nonfiction, and then with a focus on working in the self help, self development, mentoring, coaching. It kind of touches on a little bit of all of those,
Hmm.
and yeah, so that would probably it would be those genres would be the primary ones.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Um, so when it comes to mentorship, why do you feel like it's such a valuable piece to add to the puzzle when you're dealing with mental health struggles or when you're dealing with grief? Like what like obviously any extra support is going to be helpful going through those things, but what do you think about mentorship in particular is like so powerful and works so well?
Well, the main thing, as I take a look and as I've gone through and I've looked at what makes a good mentor and how could that, how could you fit that in so that it could actually be of some value to somebody who was going through, say, the grieving process.
Hmm.
And the thing that I hear all the time from people that are struggling with their healing journey is, if we only had somebody that we could talk to, if we
Hmm.
only had somebody that would listen and hear what it is we have to say, if we only had someone who respected our confidentiality and was non judgmental, and if we could find somebody that could do all of those things and
Hmm.
intertwine them in between everything else with the mental health story, that would be absolutely perfect.
Right.
That would give us hope that, if I walk beside this person who says they're going to help me, if I walk with them, my journey isn't going to be, it's still going to be tough, but it may
Hmm.
not be as tough, uh, by virtue of having that person to walk beside me.
Right. I think that is very valuable because a lot of times, even though we all experience loss, we all experience depression and things like that, it feels very isolating when we're going through it, where you just feel like I'm alone, you don't feel seen and heard. And so that's kind of the first step of helping people is to just, see and hear what they're saying and kind of validate their experience. Um,
Because when I'm working with somebody, so I'm mentoring, say, a young perspective, as I
mhm.
like to call them, a baby leader.
Right.
Um, that's some of the things that I teach at that level, is that, as somebody who may be supervising or managing somebody who's just getting started in the leadership space, one of the most important things you can teach is that, there are times when you just need to be quiet and listen and hear, and
Mm,
look for what are some of the trigger words in a conversation that you're having with this person that's sort of going to give you some insight into, number one, what their issue is, and number
right.
two, how are they going to be able to work their way through it. And mentoring and mental health, grief, all of those things, there's not much difference there in that if I have those tools, I'm going to be able to bring a lot of value to somebody who's going
Right.
through that healing journey.
Yeah, and it's important to listen when we're, engaging with other people. I feel like a lot of people do this thing where they're like rehearsing what they're going to say next rather than truly listening to what the person is saying. And especially this can happen in like arguments or any kind of conflict where you're just like, well, I have a counterpoint to what you just said, and you're just like practicing saying it in your head. But then when we're not listening to respond, we really miss out on a lot of opportunities, to really engage and understand the other person, their perspective, and come to like a resolution. Because I always tell people, I mean, you can be right and you can win the argument, or you can like fix the problem, right? So a lot of times it feels really satisfying to be right in the moment, but like it doesn't necessarily come to like a good resolution if we're not listening to the other person.
Yeah, and sometimes to sort of piggyback on what you were just saying is what I sometimes tell people is you have to take a step back and ask yourself, is this the hill I want to die on?
Absolutely. I love that phrase of saying like, yeah, it's a great way of taking stock of like what is a priority or important to me, and what can I really let slide for the sake of peace.
Yeah, it's and it's so funny that when you start to have conversations with people that there's so many of them that just have to get that parting shot in there, or
Right.
they don't listen and hear, and they miss half the conversation. They miss the point that the person was trying to make, so
Hmm.
they counter with something that is not even relevant.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, it is really important to listen, to understand. And I know that can be like a technique that people do as well, of just like having someone say back what they think the other person said can be helpful too.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, so getting back to the writing part of your journey, what does your writing process look like, going from like your ideas and your blogs and the material that you want to talk about into actually getting the book created?
So for me, I've gone through. It was easy with the first one, or so I tell myself. The second book, You Are Not Alone, took a little bit more effort, and I would the best. I think what worked the best. There was two paths. The first was that I just sat down and I wrote,
Hmm.
and I didn't I didn't try to categorize things. I didn't worry about chapters. I just, what was ever floating around in my head, I just put it down on paper.
Hmm.
I ran into a brick wall where writing and putting it on paper was became difficult. And so then what I started to do, and that worked okay for a little while, was I recorded my thoughts. So I would use, say, Zoom, and I would sit down and I would try and get myself into that frame of mood where I was starting to get creative with my thought process, and
Hmm.
I would just record it, and then I would get it transcribed into written word, and then insert that into wherever in the book that it made sense. And
Right.
that seemed to work not too bad for a period of time.
Yeah. Has it been further refined by you, or are you still doing the dictation?
I'm I'm back.
Hmm.
I'm I'm back writing again. So
Yeah.
sitting in front of the computer, and as I'm thinking, I'm writing. And but I with the third book, and it's right now the title for it is tentatively The Silent Pandemic.
Okay.
So um, so for that one, I actually went away to a resort area for a week and just secluded myself. Kind of, I was a private writer's retreat that I
Okay.
had
Nice.
created.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked. And there was some nostalgia that went along with it, in that the place I went back to was the very first posting that I had as a police officer as a married person.
Yes, yes.
So I unfortunately toured around on my own, but
Right.
I was able to, go back and see the house that we lived in a basement suite, so I was able to see that and see where, where my wife Deborah worked. She worked in the
Hmm.
bank, so I got to revisit a lot of that. Got to revisit a dear sweet friend that used to be our receptionist at our office and stuff. So
Hmm.
I got all, and that gave me some actually more content to actually,
Right.
I think I got about 30 or 40 pages of content from that visit.
Yeah, no, I can see how it would be helpful to have that kind of nostalgia factor of going and visiting these memorable places in both of your lives,
Yeah.
and reflecting upon it now after the loss. Yeah. Would you say that that's something that you would like recommend for people is to like revisit those old loved places?
Uh, you know, I don't think it's for everyone,
Right, right.
and it was an expensive trip,
Mhm.
so you sort of equate, okay, so, you know,
Right.
20, 30, 40 pages, $2,000, 3,000,
Right.
is my you know is my money better spent doing that, or is it better spent doing something else? And um, I I
I'm
think I
sure it brought a level of emotion to your writing, though, that would be very,
yeah,
very helpful, in just with the content, what it being what it is.
yeah, I would probably do it again,
Yeah, yeah.
just just
Um,
just because it's like going on a holiday per se. And
right,
I know I had been 2+ years since I'd actually taken a break and gone away,
right,
and this afforded me that opportunity. And I'm sort of thinking, maybe there's a way I can do it that it may not cost me, as much money, and I'll still get the same
right.
value. But you know,
Yeah.
and then you got to
Well,
ask,
writers' retreats are very lovely too. It's just like that affords you the opportunity to only focus on your writing and kind of only focus on your project, which is a luxury for most of us, but it's so valuable, I think, when you're able to do it.
well, and because I know of a writers retreat in Costa Rica, and
Mm.
I hear my name being called, but
Right.
it's not quite strong enough yet.
Right, right. Oh my gosh, yes, gorgeous scenery, warm weather. Yeah, I can hear it calling my name too a little bit. It is freezing here in Michigan, and Costa Rica sounds really nice right now. Yeah.
We're minus 41 tonight Celsius.
Yeah. Yes. 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 You're in Canada then, or
Yeah, yeah,
yes. Yes. Our neighbors to the north are very close.
yeah.
We're not too far away from you. Um, Yeah, no, the weather this week has been particularly brutal, and I'm like been spoiled by mild winters like the past couple of years. So yeah, Costa Rica sounds lovely right about now. Um, but going back to writing, have you ever? So you said a couple times it felt like you hit a brick wall. So is writer's block something that you struggle a lot with, and kind of how do you work around moving through that wall?
I, I I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I run into that brick wall often, but
Right.
I do have those periods of time where I do hit that brick wall. And
Mhm.
what I try to do then is, um, for me, it's about, I know with this other book that I'm in the process, I've what's helped me break through that writer's block has been um, the doing some additional research and some additional reading, and then uncovering some new content
Right.
that I was able to insert into the book. Um, and then, the other part I find with the writer's block is that um, if I can if I can get myself emotionally to a certain stage or a place,
Mhm.
that I can pretty much work my way through any writer's block. But if I can't get to that place where emotionally I'm ready and willing to move forward,
Yeah. Mhm.
you've actually raised a good question, and it makes me think that part of what I'm struggling with, I think, is that um, I'm I think to say that I'm afraid is maybe a little harsh, but I'm afraid to have to start doing more research, and I'm afraid to be because I'm afraid of what I'm going to dig up.
Right. There's a lot of vulnerability in doing the types of books that you're doing, and accessing those emotions can feel like a lot, especially like if you're in a good place, do you want to rock the boat? Or if you're not in a good place, do you want to push to that level of discomfort? It can be really hard to like willingly and voluntarily like jump up and go to those like harder places for us to visit. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like I've talked about this a couple times on the show, but like we're all really great when it comes to self care of like meeting our physical needs, getting our meals, getting sleep. We're also pretty good at like doing the self care routine, lighting candles, facials, things like that. But I don't feel like enough of us, especially creative like we are, really recharge our creative well, that inner part of our lives that is like where our imagination and creativity come from. And so like that gets depleted, and then we face writer's block and we try and push and push and push through, but like we need to be consuming media, like you said, doing research on different topics and being inspired in other ways. I feel like that's an important aspect of it as well.
Well, it is, and
Mm.
I sometimes I think you have to just kind of close the book and walk
Right.
away and walk away, and and you will know when it's time to come back.
Right, right. There's this idea that, we want to like get all this writing done fast and be productive and all of that, but we should be really as intentional with rest as we are with work, right?
Yeah.
That, if you're trying to push when it's empty, that's just gonna make it prolong the writer's block, I feel like, in a lot of times. Um, so you do the dictation, you do a little writing by hand, and you do a little typing on the computer. Do you feel like you're more creative doing it one way or another? Or
I would say that I am probably more creative when I'm sitting in front of the laptop and
mm,
things are starting to come. Like 2 days ago, I got started early in the morning, and
yeah,
everything it just flowed. Like everything
right.
flowed, and I went, "Oh, this is good." But the next day, no.
Did that magic didn't happen again? Yeah.
I So I didn't force it.
Right,
I should be trying to because I'm going through and editing my manuscript, and
right.
it's it hasn't been easy because I've some of that new content that we talked about, I've inserted that into the book, and it's I've gone through triggers, I've gone through flashbacks, I've gone through a whole number of different emotional things, but I
Mhm.
know I have to get past that in order to get to the end of the manuscript.
Right, right. And it also is going to depend on, like, because grief and healing is not linear. It's not a straight line forward. It's a spiral. You go up and down and back and forth. It feels very circuitous. Um, so I imagine that there's some days where it's just really hard to access that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is very important to, like, be putting these types of books into the world, because I do think that they are so helpful. Like, because loss is such a universal experience. So, like I said, when you're in it, you just feel so alone, and so, like, having these guideposts of kind of validating for people, like, this is normal what you're feeling and what you're thinking, is really valuable. Do you have a favorite author, and what do you think they do really well?
Ken Blanchard, God bless him. He tells every book is a story, and to me
Yeah.
that's the the hallmark of a good author is somebody that can tell can create a book with a storyline that is just that it's a story. And like I gung ho raving fans, every
Mhm.
single one of his books had a story to it, and there was a message in the book that
Mm.
um, he was trying to get his readers to actually see or listen or hear in the book.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love a good theme in fiction and nonfiction where it's like you're getting this message that's very valuable, but it's not like beaten over your head. It can be really lyrical and poignant how that gets told within an entertaining story. And I think those are the books that stick with us for sure. Are the ones that have that special theme and message in them as well. What would you say you've learned from the writing process in general?
Discipline.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would, and I'm not the best one at that because I do like like we've been talking when I'm in the mood or in the groove, so to speak. I'm very disciplined and I focus on writing and trying to get to the goal line.
Right.
But I also have times where I'm not. So what I try to do is I try not to be hard on myself, and I
Yeah.
try to be able to say, it's okay. You need to take this time for yourself, and then let's get back at it again. Let's pick a time. Let's say, okay, tomorrow we're going to from 9:30 until 11:30. We're going to spend solely on writing different sections in the book or editing or what.
Yeah.
And number one, I got the discipline, but I've also, I've said it's okay that you haven't, you're not making it your life, so to speak.
Right. I think that that is really important because shame is a strong emotion, but it's not a great motivator for most people. I find when we deal with a lot of shame, we kind of go into shutdown mode because I feel like shame, out of all the emotions that a human experiences, is the one that your brain will do like almost anything to protect you from feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not to say it doesn't serve a purpose, because all emotions serve purposes. But I feel like extending grace and kindness and understanding to ourselves is going to help us meet our goals a lot better than trying to shame ourselves into getting on top of things.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, I feel like we're modeled the shame, structure throughout our childhood rather than positive enforcement or reinforcement, which rewards work so much better for me than any kind of negative consequences. And so I've really had to learn that about myself as an adult and be like, this whole time I could have been nice to myself and got more done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm sure you see that a lot as a mentor, of just seeing like the
Yeah.
ineffective ways that we try and motivate ourselves to to meet our goals.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, which goals in general, like I always thought had to be like lofty and aspirational, or it wasn't even worth making a goal. And then it's like you learn very quickly that, like, no, if you consistently fail to meet your goal, then you're going to give up and get discouraged and frustrated. Whereas if you have more reasonable and kind of like attainable goals that you can kind of like feed off the positive emotions of meeting those goals and then have that forward momentum. Um, so, being a mentor, if you could tell a newer author who's interested in getting their book out into the world some advice, what would you give them for advice?
Know who you've written the book for.
Yes.
That's the most probably, and I'm going through that even right now with the awesome man that's mentoring me going through the manuscript and stuff. And that was one of his messages is he'd ask me questions, and the question typically was, who is your audience?
Mhm. Right.
Because you can write, how you write will is driven by your audience.
Absolutely.
So I'm with the book that the silent pandemic. I'm targeting three audiences, which is probably two too many.
Right.
But
Right.
we're what I'm trying to do is some different approaches so that I can target all three because what I'm looking at is organizations. I'm looking at a mentor who is working in the mental health space, and then I'm also looking at somebody who is on a grieving journey. So there's
Right. That's your three audiences.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a great approach for that type of book as well, to have kind of the clinical, if you're running a support group for grief, this would be a great way of structuring and organizing the materials and talking, leading discussions and stuff. And then to have it for like the layperson going through the grief as well is going to be very helpful as well. And yeah, I think knowing your audience is very, very important in all writing in general.
yeah.
Um, so, do you have a favorite part of writing?
I would have to say because I know what it does to me emotionally, and I would
Hmm.
have to say that the researching and having in your hands some of the material that it's it's almost like it's ammunition to trigger a response of sorts, and that's
Right.
kind of what I went through uh, probably the last week. I went through where I was digging up some more material because my mentor kept saying, what we need to have is we need to have a chronology of events that took place, based on certain things that we're trying to get across. And
Right.
I stumbled across a an email message that I had sent to my two children and to Deborah's sister, and I forget who else was on the distribution list, but it was a message I had sent from the hospital
Mm.
when she had been diagnosed with all the cancer and stuff that she had, and it was it was a massive trigger for me because
Right.
um, in there I actually had made the statement that I realized that Deborah was dying, and
Right.
and so I normally would not have had that experience situation take place if it were not that we were looking for more material, but we
Right.
we hadn't bargained for what we actually got.
Right, right. When it kind of transports you back into that moment of first coming to that realization is very difficult
Yeah.
emotionally, yeah, and mentally. Um, but I do understand like the idea that like getting inspired to write content is kind of a great feeling when we're writing the book. Which is, I think, what you're saying is when you're doing the research and finding the content that inspires what you're writing, that's kind of your favorite part of the
Well,
writing process.
yeah, and you sort of think because I know in a conversation I had with my publicist, um, I committed to write a book a year,
Oh yeah, yeah, which
and
isn't easy. Yeah,
I'm thinking, what were you thinking, you fool?
right, 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 right. It's always that we should be under promising and over delivering, but we always like set ourselves up for these deadlines, and then we're like, wait, why did I do that? That was on a good day that I made that promise. Yeah, when all the
Yeah.
writing's flowing and all the ideas are there. Do you have a least favorite part of writing?
I would have to say that I don't know that I would say that there's anything that I would label as least favorite.
Hmm.
Um, because behind everything that you do when you're writing a book, you start off doing the research and then putting stuff together and everything else. If you are open minded enough and you let all of this process evolve,
Hmm.
it's a very, it's humbling, but it's also very emotional. It's also
Hmm.
very, I find that I get so much. I never thought I would. I never thought I'd say this, but I get so much out of the experience
Yes,
that
yes.
it's difficult to be able to say, well, I don't like this part and I don't like that. I think that for me, anyhow, while I'm not done book number three,
Right.
I'm already starting to percolate book number four, and
Yeah, yeah.
I have to, do I want to change what it is I'm writing about? Probably not, but who
Right.
knows? I mean, that's a ways away from, and I guess it'll depend on how well the book is received.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that is a testament to a great mindset of instead of looking at it like I don't really like this part of the process, just seeing the value and what you learn in every stage of the process. That's just a great mindset to have. I really do feel like mindset shape our reality. So having like a positive mindset of looking for what value something even a hate has
Yeah.
can be really a great way of looking at the world. Um, do you struggle with at all making time for writing?
No, that's
Okay.
one that, that's one thing that I will give myself credit for is that I will normally set aside an hour, sometimes more, but I try to set a period of time aside for writing.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah, every day, and that includes weekends.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know what is it, the famous Louis L'Amour quote where he says you have to turn on the faucet for, if you want the writing to come, you've got to kind of access that regularly
Yeah,
in order for it to flow. Which I feel like that flow state is like what we're all, there's always the goal, right? Because like you said, there's some days you sit down and it just feels magical where the words are just coming out and your thoughts feel like brilliant. And then there's other days you're kind of slogging through just
yeah.
trying to get your goals met for the day. Would you say that anything influences your writing in particular?
Well, I would say that for the first book, no. The second book was um, Deborah was was an influence for sure.
Yeah.
And even the third, probably more so for the third book, just because
Yeah.
it narrows in. Um, but I also, I don't want all, I can't take all the credit for all of that because what I do have is I have an absolutely wonderful group of colleagues and friends, and they're the ones in a lot of cases that plant the seed of what's coming next, and then they help me water that seed so that it turns into something
Right.
more definitive or concrete, or it becomes that, if you use the analogy of a book as a plant, it becomes that plant that you nurture right from day one until it
Right.
blossoms, right, until it blooms. And and I get a lot of that from, because both the gift of mentoring, my best friend Jim McKillop was instrumental in kind of pushing and guiding me in the direction to
Yeah. Yeah.
do that. And then with You Are Not Alone, it was people that said, you need to write this book because the world as a whole needs to hear that message of mentoring, mental health, and all of that. So I had, some colleagues, some friends, and sometimes some people that were going to the hospital to visit somebody that was dying because of cancer. And
Hmm.
even back then, at that time frame, we were struggling with COVID, and there was all of that
Right.
going on. So I get that from a lot of people, where they kind of,
Hmm.
they plant the seed and they help me water it, and we see where it goes.
I think that's the most valuable thing a writer can have is the writing community around them.
Yeah.
That helps because, even if you don't have an official mentor to guide you along the way, like we all have questions when it comes to the writing process, when it comes to writing our stories, editing our stories, how to get it published, and all of that stuff. And the best resource for all of us is people who have done that already and can help give advice and wisdom about how they went about doing it. And so I really love that you have such a great writing community around you because I do feel like once people, like when you meet your people in life that, you call them your team, when you meet them, like your just life gets so much enrichment from that and so much help, like you said, with nurturing the plants and the books and the stories that you want to tell. So I really love that. What would you say has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Oh, hands down, You Are Not Alone.
Yeah.
The book itself, Amazon #1 bestseller in North America and the UK.
Oh,
Uh,
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Global Book Award bronze medal, for,
Wow. Yeah.
for that. And so, yeah, truly blessed that way. And as a result of that, I suppose, so I'm told, I've reached international best-selling author status. If
Yay. Yeah.
all kinds of things that have happened that
Right.
that I hadn't, number one, I hadn't planned on, I hadn't counted
Right.
on. I wanted to write You Are Not Alone. My mission was to write this book because people said there was a need.
Right. Right. Do you have do you have any advice for people who want to write this type of books of how to go about breaking down their ideas or organizing their thoughts, or any tips that you have for anyone who wants to write like a similar type of nonfiction story?
So I would suggest very strongly, and I'm just coming to realize a lot of the things that I can do better. And so one of them is is understanding and knowing my audience. And so somebody that's new coming into, the writing world,
Yeah.
um, you need to have a sense of purpose. So why are you writing the book and who is the book being written for? And if you can capture those two things, that's going to be probably the most important decision that you're going to make in your writing career is those two things. And and to be able to then take that and start to I'm a and I know I've read in places where people say it's, you know, when somebody says, well, just write, just keep writing, they disagree wholeheartedly with that approach. I don't. I'm
Hmm.
a firm believer that, number one, sense of purpose. Number two, audience. Number
Hmm.
three, you just keep writing as the stuff is coming into your head, get it down on paper. We'll worry about organizing it later.
Right,
Let's
right.
capture it because I don't know what you're like, but I know that with me, if I don't get it on paper, it's gone.
Oh, absolutely. The better the idea, the faster you forget it, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm
Well, that,
always like, "Oh, that's brilliant. There's no way I'll ever forget it." And then it's gone. I curse myself by saying that many a time. No, I write down everything because it's very true. Like you can be 100% sure that you're going to remember it because you love that, and then it's just gone. Like that's the
yeah.
cruelty of the muses, right? They're
I
very
I started packing a little black book and I would write myself notes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was okay. Um, I had to remember where the book was. That was the challenge.
That's the problem, yeah. That could be a big challenge, yes. I have a giant binder for my books and my series.
Okay,
I like a I I'll take notes randomly, but I try to compile it into the binder so that I'm not reading an entire notebook trying to find out like what color my character's eyes are because I don't know where it is in the book. So the organizational feature of a binder is really nice for me because then I can be like, look up characters, it's right there, easy to find. Um, and then also they're giant, so they're a lot easier to find in the chaos of your house. And you're like, I need that detail from book two, because I'm writing book three now, so that'll be really helpful for me. I find, um, but yes, like those little tricks of finding out how to organize yourself that works for you, right? Because there's no
yeah,
blanket one way that's going to work for everyone. But yeah, working with yourself instead of against yourself.
yeah.
I always like to say you got to meet yourself where you're at, not where you wish you were, right? So I wish I was more organized. I wish I was better. But right now I got to meet myself where it's at. And it's like giant binder that's hard to miss.
Well,
It's the sweet.
I actually like that because that's what I'm struggling with right now is
Yeah.
that my editor wants certain pieces of content in different sections that so
Yeah.
you may be three-quarters of the way through the book and then he'll say that well this piece here at the
Hmm.
three-quarter mark would sound better if it was at the beginning of the book. And so then I'm
Right.
figuring out how the heck am I going to make that happen without getting everything all twisted and confused and everything else. And
Right.
it's taken me a while. I'm probably a couple times where I've probably missed what what he wanted, but we'll work through it and we'll sort of see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like
Another great thing to do is like index cards because you can shuffle them around a little. So like putting what each chapter is and then like looking at the order of it on index cards, that can be really helpful. But yeah, it's just that tediousness of um, copy paste from the section to another section, or like sometimes it helps like if you print it out, then you swap the papers around.
yeah.
That can help you just get a better idea of what it looks like as an end result. Um, are you reading anything in particular right now?
I knew you might ask that.
Yeah.
I just started this book, and it's the Four Sacred Gifts, uh,
Oh, yeah.
Indigenous Wisdom for Modern Times by Dr. Anita Sanchez. And
Oh, yeah.
a colleague of mine said you need to read this because it speaks specifically to like one of the gifts is the gift of forgiveness for the unforgiving.
Right. Oh, I imagine that's a very impactful chapter or two. Yeah.
So I've got that that I just started here probably well the beginning of the week I think when last week beginning a lot doesn't
Yeah.
last week sometime. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the one that I'm reading right now, and so with me the story goes that if the book doesn't capture my attention span, albeit how short it is, in the first couple chapters, chances are it goes to my graveyard of books.
Right, the do not finish pile,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. It's really funny. When I was young, I had that like completionist like mindset where I was like, I have to finish a book no matter how bad it is because there's value in finishing things, right? I actually, the first time I didn't finish a book, I asked my mom for permission because I was like, I think middle school, early high school, and I was just like, Mom, this book is terrible. Like my dad had found it at some random garage sale. I think it was like indie published, but this was like I said, early 2000s maybe. And it was just not great, right? It was just I couldn't bring myself to read more than 2 or 3 pages, but I had to go and ask my mom, and I was like, Mom, please, like, tell
yeah.
me it's okay not to read this book. And I laugh about it so much now because it's just like now I'm like, time is too short. There's too many wonderful books for me to waste time on a book that's just not meant for me,
Yeah,
right?
that's
It's not
right.
necessarily like a good or a bad book. It's just sometimes a book isn't you're not the right audience for that book. And so passing up on it is like totally okay. But I feel like that's something that you have to learn that like it's okay to not finish something because your time is better spent elsewhere.
I agree because I think growing up as a youngster, I think it was
Mhm.
the Hardy Boys and
Right.
and Nancy Drew, and I read every single one of those books,
Yeah, yeah.
the whole series, and I wouldn't even begin to tackle anything like that now.
Right, right. Now that you know what you love, right? Yeah. I always say if you're struggling with reading, you just haven't found the right books for you, right? Because when you find a book that you love, it's so easy, right? It's intuitive. Um, do you have any writing advice that you hate that you just think really does not apply with the broad strokes that it uses or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Oh yeah.
No, I would have to say no.
Okay. Very well, it's still a good answer. That I think that there's a kernel of truth in a lot of advice. For me, the big ones that I go against is like when they say always or never. Then I'm like, there's always a time for something, and there's
Yeah.
never a time for something. So those are usually the advice that I don't like. The really blanket statement ones that are like, you always have to do this, or you should never do this. Yeah.
Well, if and it's kind of the mentor in me kicking in, but
Yeah.
I look at situations like that where somebody's giving advice and is I like to take the step back and sort of listen and hear what they're saying, and then
Hmm.
looking for not so much what's in it for me, but
Right.
is what are the kernels, the nuggets
Yeah.
that
That you
that
can
are
use. Yeah.
that I can draw out because I try to look at things more so from the positive rather than the negative. So,
Yes.
what
Yes.
are what are some takeaways that we can take away from this conversation that are
Mm.
going to help me do this or help me do that, and
Yes.
and kind of look at it from that perspective.
And I think, like I said, once again, that's a wonderful mindset to have. That's very, very helpful because then you can learn from every situation, even when you feel like maybe this isn't an expert talking, but I can still learn from them and their
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. for that reason, I tell people like read widely and read deeply. Like you can learn how to craft relationships from romances. You can learn pacing from thrillers. You can learn, something really from every genre of writing that will be valuable to your story that you're trying to tell. And I just love that. Like I said, that open mind mentality and mindset that you have. I do want to give you an opportunity to let people listening along at home know where they can find out more about you and your book. So if you want to go ahead and share your socials or any website that you have, just where can we find out more about you and your book?
So yeah, the book is actually both books, Gift of Mentoring and You Are Not Alone, are both available on Amazon. So you can get either one from Amazon.com or Amazon.ca. So the
Mm-hmm.
book is available there, and you should be able to on my website www.talentc.ca. So that's the word talent, letter C on the end.ca, and there should be a link to the Amazon site for the book as well. And if you get a chance to go in and take a look at the website, it'll give you a perspective on some of the things that I've got on the go with Talent C. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there's quite a bit of stuff there. If you want to get a hold of me, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. So I'm fairly active there, and you can direct message me through LinkedIn if you wish. But LinkedIn has definitely got um, some good content there for you to take a look at. Some of the things that
Yeah.
I've done and stuff like that. And then I have a bit of a presence on Facebook, and then a little bit of a one on, I guess it's called X now,
Right. Formerly known as Twitter. Yeah.
formerly known as Twitter. So you can access me there on those two sites as well. And last but not least is if you need to talk, you need to know where to get some stuff or anything like that. I have no issues whatsoever. In fact, I encourage it that if you want to send me an email message, you can do so. So Doug.Lawrence, Lawrence, at Talent C, so the word talent, letter C on the end.ca, and send me a message. And, if I can answer it by email, I will. But if you want to start a dialogue, we can certainly do that through Zoom or however you're comfortable. But
Yeah.
um, just know that if you reach out, that I'm going to be there for you no matter what.
Well, and how very generous and kind of you. That is a wonderful resource to have available to people, especially like, with those topics of PTSD and mental health struggles. Like to know that there's somebody that they can reach out and talk to is so helpful. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've had an absolute wonderful conversation with you and a wonderful time. So thank you again for joining us this evening. I know you're probably super busy, so we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I always enjoy having a conversation with somebody who actually understands and gets it. So thank you
Mhm.
for that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And thank you to everyone who's listening along at home. Remember to catch our next episode, which always releases on Friday. And remember, there's more than one way up a mountain. If you're interested in being a guest on The Telnut Show, you can find us on social media at The Telnut Show or email us at thetellnutshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.